My name is Meredith Calloway. I'm 33, and 11 days before my little sister's wedding, my own mother called me up, sweet as anything, and told me my 6-year-old daughter was no longer welcome. Not just off the flower girl list, off the guest list, entirely. A little girl who'd spent almost 2 months rehearsing her ribbon toss down our hallway, spinning in a dusty rose dress every night until she got dizzy, counting her turns out loud, like the number mattered more than anything else in the world. By the time I found out what my daughter's place at that wedding had actually been traded away for, I was already under contract to cook the entire reception for 160 guests. So I cooked it, every course, plated perfect, and right before they wheeled out the cake, I walked into the middle of that reception hall, tapped a spoon against my glass, and talked for 3 minutes. My mother hasn't said a word to me since, and that's not even the part that keeps me up at night, because what nobody in that ballroom knew was that my daughter had already been sold off, 9 days before I ever opened my mouth. Stay with me, because it gets worse before it gets better. And I need you to understand who I was before I explain who I had to become. My father dropped dead of a heart attack in our driveway on a random Thursday when I was 16, walking from the car to get the mail. My sister Ivy was 9. My mother, Colleen, grieved him the only way she knew how, by making sure nobody could ever look at our house and guess what had happened inside it. A widow's house, in her rulebook, was never allowed to look like one. The hedges stayed trimmed, the holiday cards went out on schedule, all 3 of us smiling, like nothing had cracked. And somebody had to build that illusion, on a pension and a part-time shift folding fabric at a craft store. That somebody was me. I was 18 the year I cooked a full holiday dinner for 19 relatives in my mother's kitchen, and by the time everything hit the table, there wasn't a chair left with my name on it. "A hostess's daughter finds a way to make room," she said, already walking off to greet someone at the door. So I ate standing over the sink, watching everyone else use the dishes I'd washed myself. Nobody noticed I never sat down. I'm not telling you that for sympathy. I'm telling you so you understand the math I was raised on. My mother never called it a burden. She called it my gift, the thing I was good at. But there's a real difference between being loved and being useful. And when you're 16 and your father just died on the pavement outside your house, those 2 feelings get served on the same plate. It can take half a lifetime to figure out which one you actually swallowed. Ivy was the baby, and babies get protected. And I never resented her for that. I just learned to take instructions. It took me another 17 years, and 1 dusty rose dress, to notice I'd never stopped. Here's the part I'm proud of. I run my own catering company, the Copper Spoon. My name on the side of a delivery van, my own knives, a rented kitchen out on Route 9, with a walk-in cooler I signed for myself at 27, hands shaking. 5 years running. My right hand in that kitchen is a woman named Marisol, who can butcher a chicken faster than most people can find the shears, and who owns exactly 1 facial expression reserved specifically for my family. I married at 24, had my daughter Nora at 26, divorced at 29, mostly amicably. Her father lives out of state and calls, most Sundays. It's me and Nora. My daughter is 6, and she treats everything like it matters. She sorts her crayons by color family. She keeps a laminated chart tracking her stuffed animals' birthdays, checked off in pen, because pencil doesn't count. When she loves something, she practices it until she owns it. Grown-ups call her an old soul, which mostly means she notices things other kids miss. And you should remember that, because a kid who notices everything can also do math you'd rather she never learned. For years, the 2 of us circled the family's edges the way I always had. Me bringing the food, Nora bringing the joy, both of us mistaking being useful for being wanted. Then last spring, my sister Ivy showed up with a bottle of something sparkling and news that changed everything. She was engaged to Marcus Whitfield. If you've never lived somewhere small, let me translate the name. In Millbrook Falls, Whitfield is the insurance office downtown. the reserved pew at St. Andrew's Chapel, the letters carved into the new hospital wing. And presiding over all of it, like royalty, sits Marcus's grandmother, Eleanor Whitfield. 71, pearls at breakfast, a voice that's never needed to be raised, and a gift for making a compliment feel like an inspection. Marcus himself is a genuinely sweet, unremarkable man who looks at my sister like she invented sunlight. None of this is his fault. You should have seen my mother when that ring showed up. She didn't just get excited. She ascended into it. We're walking into that Whitfield house, through the front door, as family, she told me, gripping my forearm hard enough to leave a mark. My mother had spent her whole life as the relative people were polite to out of obligation, the widow the church women were kind to. In that specific way, kindness can look down on someone. I ached for her a little, watching her light up. What I missed completely was the quiet arithmetic already running behind her eyes. A woman finally handed a seat at the good table, calculating exactly what she'd spend to keep it. My gift to my sister came in 2 pieces, and I need you to hold on to the numbers because they come back around later, wearing a bow. First, the venue. Ivy fell for a place called Sable Creek Farm, string lights through the rafters, and they wanted $6,800 down to hold a June Saturday. Nobody in my family had that lying around, except the sister with the catering business and the color-coded spreadsheets. I wrote the check and handed it to my mother in her kitchen, and she took it the way you take a napkin, mid-sentence, without looking, already reading a Whitfield guest list out loud. Second, the food itself. 160 guests, 5 courses, my crew, my knives, at cost, with one line typed at the bottom of the contract, balance waived at final settlement, gift from the owner. Marisol watched me sign it and gave me her one face. That's a slow month of income you're handing away, boss. It's family, I said. It's family, she echoed back, which, from Marisol, means more than most people's whole paragraphs. In March, Ivy knelt down to Nora's exact eye level on our kitchen floor. Nora Calloway, will you be my flower girl? My daughter went still, the way she does when something matters too much to move, then nodded like a knight accepting a mission, and announced she'd need to practice. For nearly 2 months, our hallway became an aisle. She tore junk mail into paper petals and rationed them out, one handful at a time, because you can't just dump them, Mama. You have to share them with the whole aisle. That dusty rose dress hung on her closet door the entire time, where she could see it from bed. In April, I hosted the tasting at my own kitchen, both families crammed around folding tables and linen, the first time the whole Whitfield contingent set foot in my territory. Nora helped the way she does, filling bread baskets, folding napkins into fans, narrating the entire thing under her breath. Eleanor Whitfield arrived the way weather arrives, unhurried, certain of itself, in gray silk, and complimented my cooking the way you'd appraise furniture. While she talked, her eyes did inventory. My secondhand chairs, my mother's department store dress, my daughter. Beside her sat her granddaughter, Sophie. 6 years old, white dress, patent shoes, bored senseless. Eleanor watched the 2 girls the way you'd compare fabric swatches, and then said, lightly to the whole table, Sophie's been flower girl at 3 Whitfield weddings. That child was born for a church aisle. A silence dropped, with an actual draft in it. My mother laughed a beat too fast. Well, everyone contributes something to make a wedding beautiful. Hold on to that sentence. After the tasting, I noticed my mother and Eleanor still at the far table, neither touching their coffee, heads bent close, my mother nodding the way she nods at church, small and grateful. I told myself they were discussing centerpieces. That night, I called her directly and asked if there was any noise about the flower girl because of what Eleanor had said. Oh, that's just how Eleanor talks. Nora's the flower girl. It's settled. Don't be dramatic. I called Ivy too, on purpose, believing in backup systems. Is there any version of this where Nora isn't your flower girl? What? No, Mir. She's my flower girl. I adore that kid. She texted a photo an hour later, the dress on its hanger with a heart drawn over it, captioned, "My girl." 2 people. The same answer, plus a photo with a heart on it. There was no third call left to make. Only trust or paranoia. And I'd spent my whole life being the steady one, not the detective. So I trusted them and went back to my prep lists. What I couldn't have known was that the answer was true when they gave it. The deal simply hadn't closed yet. May was a blur of good work, but 2 small things lodged in me, like a splinter. At the venue walkthrough, my mother introduced me to the coordinator, a woman named Naomi. Hand on my shoulder. "This is our caterer." Then, a beat later, almost an afterthought, my daughter. And the budget started performing miracles. A drone videographer, a champagne tower, chair covers upgraded to something with a French name. When I asked gently where the sudden altitude was coming from, my mother waved me off. "I've handled it. A mother finds a way." Write that down. Next to everyone contributes something. Those 2 sentences were about to collide. There was one more sign that spring, small enough I almost missed it. The last Flower Girl rehearsal, meant to walk both girls through timing with the officiant, kept getting rescheduled and then quietly vanished from the calendar. When I asked, my mother said the officiant had it handled. I believed her, the way I'd believed everything else that spring, because the alternative meant admitting I already knew. My mother, meanwhile, transformed in ways the whole town could watch. She changed her Mother of the Bride dress 3 times, each version a shade closer to Whitfield gray, said the name with that same small pause Eleanor used, and started nearly every sentence with "Eleanor feels." I dropped groceries off one afternoon and found her at the kitchen table moving place cards with actual tweezers, and when I reached to help, she pulled the card back, without looking up. I had compassion for whatever hunger was driving that. I never once asked what it was currently feeding on. 9 days out, Nora was at her happiest, her loudest. She'd started a countdown calendar taped inside her closet, 19 hand-drawn ribbons, 1 crossed out each morning, with a ceremony she'd invented herself. She practiced her walk even without the dress on, narrating it to her stuffed animals lined up like an audience. She kept asking if Aunt Ivy would cry when she saw her, and she'd started sleeping with her petal basket on the nightstand, so it doesn't get nervous. That's exactly when my phone rang. It was a Tuesday, 3 weeks out, and I was in the walk-in counting cases of butter when my mother called. I want to walk you through this almost word for word, because the construction of it deserves study. She opened with logistics, head counts, someone's dietary restriction, had me nodding along. Then, in that same scheduling tone, no gear change at all. "Oh, and the processional's been adjusted. Sophie's handling the flower girl duties. It's a Whitfield tradition, goes back generations. Isn't that sweet? And since the reception's really an adult crowd, we think it's simplest if Nora sits this one out. She'll be happier at home with a sitter." The cooler fan hummed. My pen stopped. "You're uninviting her from the wedding." "Uninviting is such a dramatic word," she said, having just done exactly that. Then the line, polished from 4 decades of use. "Everyone contributes something to make a wedding beautiful. Please don't make this a thing." That same evening was Nora's final dress fitting, promised for a week, circled with 3 exclamation points. I hadn't figured out what to say yet, so I didn't cancel. At 6 o'clock, my daughter stood in my kitchen in that dusty rose dress and spun, arms out, chin up, tool rising. Marisol clapped the count. She stuck the landing, wobbling, triumphant. 14, Mama. I tied it. I applauded along with everyone else. My mother's phone call sitting in my chest, like a swallowed stone. I told her the next night, as gently as I could build it. Plans had changed. Grown-ups only this time. Nothing she'd done wrong. She sat with her hands folded and said, "Okay, that's okay." For 2 hours, I believed we'd landed it softly. Then, passing her door at bedtime, I heard it. The small, deliberate, muffled crying of a kid who's chosen her pillow, so nobody will hear. I went in. She surfaced, blotchy, trying to be fine, and asked the question I'll be hearing for the rest of my life. Mama, did I do something wrong? She thought she'd been let go, like a performance review that hadn't gone her way. Of course she did. In her world, roles are earned. I told her no, 100 different ways, and she nodded politely at all of them, believing none. Over the days that followed, I watched her quietly close the case file on herself. The dress stayed on the door, but she stopped looking at it from her pillow. The calendar disappeared into a drawer, folded, not crumpled, which was worse. And she stopped spinning. Entirely. My kid had set a personal record and retired it at 6, without a press release. I still didn't have the why. That took another 9 days, and it came together the way a bookkeeper finds a discrepancy, a column that refuses to add up, no matter how many times you run it. Naomi called about linens and mentioned, in passing, that the videographer's second invoice had already been settled. Eleanor's personal check again, such a generous family. Before catching herself, you didn't hear that from me. A personal check. Twice now. Then there was the bachelorette party, still stuck in my head. A bridesmaid named Brooke, 3 drinks deep, leaning in. Thank God for Grandma Whitfield, honestly, if she hadn't stepped up with the... And then she caught herself so hard, I watched it happen. Some guardrail kicking in, a half-second late. The flowers, she finished in a different voice. She's covering some of the flowers. Then she laughed too loud and left, fast. I drove out to the bridal shop where Ivy was having her final fitting, and alone with my sister among the mirrors, I asked her one question, in the voice I use when a client's books don't balance. Ivy, what exactly did Eleanor's $11,000 buy? I hadn't actually known it was 11. I'd guessed low. My sister, in a dress held together with pins, went white. It wasn't 9, it was 11. Her hand flew to her mouth, and the mirrors gave me 6 reflections of her realizing what she'd just said. It came out in fragments. A check right after the tasting. A wedding fund contribution. One condition, never stated, and completely understood by everyone but me. Sophie carries the basket. It paid for so much, Mir. Mom said Nora would never have to find out. I kept almost telling you. She was crying now, pins and all. It's one walk down one aisle. It didn't feel like it cost anyone anything. I looked at my little sister, the bride my own daughter had been tearing up junk mail for, every night, and heard my own voice from somewhere far away. It cost her 14 spins. Then I left her standing there. I drove straight to my mother's. 15 minutes, radio off, and found her exactly where I expected, seating chart spread out, tweezers in hand. I didn't sit. Eleanor's check, $11,000. When were you going to mention what it paid for? My mother doesn't deny anything. Denial admits a crime happened. Instead, she presents her case. The Whitfields, she informed me, were spending $65,000 on this wedding. Our entire contribution amounted to, and she said this without a flicker of shame, you cooking. Was she supposed to let Ivy marry into that family as the bride whose relatives brought a store-bought casserole? Eleanor's gift had dignity in it. Sophie was a lovely child. Traditions matter to families like that. Nora would bounce back. Kids forget by September. Kids forget. My daughter, who still remembers the name of a waitress who slipped her extra cherries 2 summers ago. Did you cash that check before or after you crossed your own granddaughter off the guest list? Her chin lifted, her tell, for a question beneath her, which is also her tell, for when the answer is bad. Don't be crude about the order of things, she said finally. It was all one arrangement. That was the closest thing to a confession I'd ever get, tidy enough to hang on a wall. I didn't raise my voice. Raising it would have comforted her. Thank you for being precise, I told her, and left, closing her front door as gently as you'd close a sleeping baby's room, which frightened her worse than slamming it ever could, because she texted me twice before I reached the end of her street. I priced out the version where I walked away entirely, the way I price everything else in my life. Sable Creek Books vendors jointly with the family, and bailing that late doesn't just torch this one wedding. It torches my standing with the venue that sends me most of my referrals. In a town this size, the caterer who abandoned her own sister's wedding isn't gossip. It's a headstone. 5 years of building this. Marisol's paycheck. My part-timers. The deposit was already gone, either way. The only people an actual walkout would starve were 160 guests who'd never done a thing to me, worse than an awkward chicken dance. The vote that settled it came from a 6-year-old. Nora overheard me in the kitchen with Marisol, going harder than I meant to, saying things like, "Just pull the crew, let them serve gas station trays." She tugged my apron and looked up at me with those serious little eyes. "Don't ruin Aunt Ivy's wedding, Mama. The flowers are going to be so pretty." Marisol waited until Nora wandered off before she said what she'd clearly been holding since the phone call. "You don't owe people a dinner after they go and sell your kid, Meredith." I didn't have an answer then. I'm not sure I have one now. I just went back to my prep list, so I would cook. Every course, perfectly, because my name was still on that van either way. But somewhere between the cooler and that apron tug, a second menu started writing itself in me. Calm, itemized. I prepped that toast the way I prep a service. 3 index cards, cut down ruthless, until 3 minutes was actually 3 minutes. Marisol read the cards on her break, crossed out one word, upset, and wrote precise above it. She squared them up like a deck and handed them back. "I'll be at table 3, she said. Closest to the head table, the entirety of Marisol's love language, and more than enough. I pulled the contract and reread my own plain font. Balance waived at final settlement. Nothing was waived yet. I printed a clean invoice, slid it into a cream envelope, and tucked it into my knife roll next to the honing steel. 5 days out, the family made one final offer. Ivy texted, not our mother, who negotiates through envoys, once a door's been closed softly at her. If everything could just stay pleasant, Nora was welcome at the reception. A seat waiting at table 14 once the ceremony wrapped up. An olive branch. I'd built that seating chart with my own hands, under tweezer supervision. Table 14 sits by the kitchen doors, behind the speaker stack, reserved for +1s nobody's met. My daughter, readmitted as an afterthought, after Sophie's petals, after everything Nora had rehearsed for 2 months, provided her mother behaved. The old me would have taken that deal without blinking, 17 years of converting scraps into gratitude and calling it family. The pull was real. She'd still get the dress, still get cake, half a loaf beats none. But I kept picturing Nora's pillow, turned the other way, facing away from that dress. You don't hand a child a consolation seat at the same auction where her roll got sold. I typed 4 drafts and deleted them all, then sent the only true one. Nora has plans. 3 dots appeared and disappeared twice. Nothing ever came back. The night before the wedding, I stood alone inside that barn until nearly midnight, finishing the staging. The uninvited child's own mother laying out 160 place settings by her grandmother's laminated chart. I did it flawlessly because half of what I planned to say the next night only worked if nobody could dismiss me as sloppy or bitter. I squared every fork, folded every napkin the exact 2-handed way Nora does it. At the head table, I set Eleanor's card and my mother's, 3rd seat from center. Down front where the flower girl sits, the card read Sophie, in calligraphy my mother had paid extra for. I set it down gently. None of this was that little girl's fault. The wedding day moved like controlled fire. I wasn't at the ceremony. The caterer belongs with her ovens. I heard it secondhand from Naomi, who mentioned, not unkindly, that the little Whitfield girl had done the flowers fine, roses everywhere, though she got bored halfway, and handed her basket off to a groomsman. Handed the basket off. My Nora had spent 2 months learning to ration hers, so the whole aisle got a fair share. File that one away. By 6, cocktail hour hit the terrace, and my kitchen went to wartime speed, and compliments drifted back through the swinging doors, vendor-flavored. Eleanor just told her whole table this is the best wedding food she's had in 20 years. She asked who did it. And then, not knowing it was a punchline, Your mother told her. Oh, a place we know. A place we know. 17 years of holidays out of my hands. $6,800 of my own deposit under that dance floor. My sister's whole dinner, cooked at cost, off my knives. I stood at the pass with a torch and laughed. Alone. Because there's a point past hurt, where the truth just gets funny. At 8:40, the band leader called for toasts. My mother stood in her Whitfield gray dress and gave 3 minutes on family being the one thing money can't buy. At 9:15, the cake was set to roll. My window sat between the two, narrow and golden. I took off my gloves, pulled the envelope and my cards, and walked out through the kitchen doors in my chef's whites. I tapped a water glass 3 times. A room full of champagne, drops to silence for that sound, out of pure trained reflex. I watched my mother's smile hold its shape, while her eyes ran the math. I watched Ivy's laugh freeze mid-breath. I watched Eleanor set her fork down with the caution of a general smelling weather. I glanced at Marisol, who gave me exactly 1 centimeter of a nod. Good evening. Most of you don't know me. I'm Meredith, the older sister of the bride and tonight's caterer, or, as I was introduced earlier, a place we know. A ripple moved through the crowd. Every plate you ate came off my own knives. That was my gift to my sister. So was the deposit on this room. We give what we have. My mother taught me that. She has a saying. My mother's face went through a small earthquake because she knew her own line and knew exactly where I was pointing it. Everyone contributes something to make a wedding beautiful. A silence dropped with actual texture to it. 9 days before this wedding, my 6-year-old daughter was pulled off the guest list. She was supposed to be the flower girl. She practiced in our hallway every night for 2 months. I was told it was tradition. It wasn't. There was an $11,000 personal check that came with the understanding the flower girl's basket would change hands. My mother accepted it. My daughter was the line item. She's home tonight with a sitter, and she's the one who told me not to ruin this party because she wanted the flowers to look pretty. She's 6, and she was the only person in this arrangement who acted like family. A chair creaked. Marcus stared at his own grandmother, mouth open, the last honest man in the building. Somewhere near the back, a woman leaned to whisper behind her hand. The band leader lowered his mic. An inch. A fork clinked down, then another, like the first drops before a storm breaks. My mother rose, not gracefully, pulled up like something on a wire. Meredith. Half command, half plea, and then her composure cracked, down a seam I'd never seen open in public, and what fell out was 40 years old, and true. You have no idea what it's like, she said, voice shaking, unrehearsed, for maybe the first time in decades. I have been the poor relation my entire life. The charity pew, the casserole people were polite about. One time I wanted this family to walk into a room and not be the ones everyone quietly feels sorry for. For a second, the room tilted toward her, and something in my chest tilted with it, because that was a real wound, older than me, and I'd grown up eating off its table too. She was a scared girl once, but you can be a casualty and a cannon at the same time, and she'd aimed herself at a 6-year-old. Ivy had both hands over her mouth, mascara gone. Behind me, I heard the bandleader set his mic down entirely, like the whole playlist had just become irrelevant. Then I watched her feel the room's sympathy and try to cash it in. Her chin lifted, her voice found its committee register. This is a family misunderstanding, and it will be handled privately. No, I said, not loud, just final. You had every chance to handle it privately. We're done with privately. I carried the cream envelope to the cake table and set it against the base, like a place card. A gift is something given freely, between people who see each other. What happened here wasn't that, so I've done a little bookkeeping. The catering balance I was going to waive tonight, $9,400, is no longer waived. I turned to my mother. It comes out to almost exactly the size of a certain check. That money was always going to be spent on this wedding. I've corrected which line it lands on. Consider my daughter's dignity undonated. A sound moved through the room that wasn't quite a gasp and wasn't quite a laugh. arithmetic completing in 160 heads at once. The venue deposit stays my gift to Ivy. The dinner you've eaten stays paid for too, and my crew will take care of every one of you the rest of the night, because none of you did anything wrong, and neither did the food. I looked at my sister. Ivy, I love you. I've loved you since you were 10 days old, and I catered your wedding with everything I had, but you watched her practice for 2 months, and you knew, and you spent it anyway. Ivy was crying, pins and mirrors and all, and there wasn't anything left to say, and we both knew it. You were right about one thing, Mom. Everyone does contribute something to make a wedding beautiful. Nora gave the most. As of tonight, my table is closed. Nobody moved. 160 of Millbrook Falls' finest sat in a silence you could have plated. Someone set down a fork, for good. The band leader held his microphone, like he'd forgotten what it was for. I untied my apron, folded it in half, and half again, and laid it over an empty chair. On my way out, I stopped beside Eleanor, keeping my voice at conversation volume, because some receipts deserve hand delivery. The food really is the best you've had in 20 years. Here's the other true thing. You bought yourself an aisle tonight. You got exactly what you paid for. But the little girl who learned to share her petals with the whole aisle, one handful at a time, you couldn't have afforded her. Nobody in this room could. Eleanor looked at me a long moment and didn't pretend to misunderstand. She gave me a single nod. One queen, quietly acknowledging a line had been drawn. I walked the length of that hall, past table 3, where Marisol stood at her post like a color guard. Crew finishes the night. Full pay, full polish, cake at 9:15. Yes, chef, she said, louder than it needed to be, and it rang off the chandeliers like a bell. In the parking lot, I peeled the magnetic sign off the van and dropped it in the passenger footwell. I sat behind the wheel and let my hands finally shake, now that I'd given myself permission. It didn't feel like fireworks. It felt exactly like standing in that walk-in cooler. Cold, quiet, and necessary. Nora was still awake when I got home, sitting up with her lamp on, waiting for the full report. Did everybody like the food? Best in 20 years. Was the cake pretty? Very pretty, I said, and she nodded, satisfied, my own quality control department. Then she slid into her pillow, turned back around to face the closet door. Facing the dress. Mama, is it Sunday tomorrow? It's Sunday tomorrow, baby. Good, she said. I have plans. The bill for those 3 minutes arrived overnight, in installments. 2 missed calls from my mother, no voicemail. She never leaves evidence, and I come by that trait honestly. A voicemail from Ivy at 1 a.m, wedding band still audible, half sobbed. How could you, on my day, in front of everyone? Then, in the next breath, I'm sorry, Mir. I kept trying to tell you. A long, wet silence, and then, very small, before the click. The food really was perfect. That voicemail is basically the whole story of my sister. 30 seconds over budget, exactly like always. A text arrived from a Whitfield-adjacent number that read only, Magnificent-Fi. I chose not to interpret that. I sat on my porch at 2 a.m. with a glass of the good stuff I usually save for catering events and let the cost be whatever the cost was going to be. I don't want anyone listening to this to think boundaries feel like a victory lap. They feel like amputation, clean, survivable. But gone is still gone. My mother had held my daughter the day she was born. My sister once slept in my bed for a month after our father died, 10 years old and scared of the quiet house. Those people are real to me, and I closed the table on them anyway, because they let themselves get confused with the people who put a price on my child. Both things get to be true. That's the actual tax on all of this. And I'm still paying pieces of it. 11 days later, a bank transfer landed in the Copper Spoons account. $9,400 exact, no memo. My mother paid it, inside the 15-day window. I'd bet my walk-in cooler that a second Whitfield check made that same trip, behind the scenes. Some scandals turn out cheaper to settle quietly. My mother and I haven't spoken since that ballroom. She tells the women at church I humiliated the family. Half of them nod along. The other half quietly started booking their event trays from a place they know. My fall calendar filled by August anyway. 2 weddings, a retirement dinner, the hospital fundraiser, booked by women who looked me in the eye, a beat longer than necessary when they called. Small towns keep 2 sets of books. The official one runs on names. The real one runs on who actually witnessed what. Ivy mailed a printed thank you card from her honeymoon, the same one every guest received, except underneath the script. She'd added in shaky handwriting, "I'm going to tell Nora I'm sorry myself, once I'm brave enough to. I'm working on it." I filed that card away with the folded countdown calendar. That door isn't nailed shut against her forever. She was 10 once too, asleep in my bed, scared of an empty house. I don't forget where people started. But the table stays closed until that apology gets delivered to the 6-year-old it's actually owed, at her exact height. Eye to eye. That Sunday, we held what we started calling Ribbon Girl Day. My backyard, a checkered tablecloth, lemon cake, wildflowers stuffed into jam jars. A playlist Nora curated herself, with the seriousness of a national holiday. Marisol and her husband came, my neighbor and her sister, the babysitter, and Naomi, who heard about it, and asked a little teary if she could come too. "Even wedding professionals get tired of watching the wrong side win," she told me, which might be the truest sentence anyone in that industry has ever handed me for free. We mowed an aisle, straight down the middle of the lawn. Nora took the dress off her closet door with her own 2 hands. Her decision, her ceremony, and walked that aisle, scattering real petals, rationing them the way she'd taught herself, sharing them with the whole length of grass. 6 adults clapped like it was a royal wedding, and Marisol's husband let out a whistle so loud a dog 2 yards over started barking, which made Nora laugh so hard she nearly dropped her basket. Then she planted her arms out wide, launched into a spin, bare feet on June grass, counting out loud, with the whole yard counting behind her. She blew past 14 without slowing, and when she staggered to a stop, dizzy and thrilled, she threw both fists up. 20, Mama! New record! That night, tucking her in, with grass still on her feet, she looked up at me, right as she drifted off and delivered the verdict she'd apparently been drafting for weeks. "Mama, I didn't do anything wrong." Not a question, a finding. "No, baby," I told her. "You never did." I stood in her doorway a long time after the lamp clicked off. The dusty rose dress hung back on its door, retired now from other people's weddings, undefeated in every way that actually counts, at home. Not a reminder of the wedding she lost, but proof of the day she finally figured out her worth was never anything anyone else got to put a price on.